My name is Yvonne, and I am 32 years old. I live in Denver, Colorado, where I work as an accountant for a real estate company. For most of my life, I believed that family was the safest place in the world, the one place where I truly belonged. My parents were about to celebrate their 40th wedding anniversary, a milestone that should have filled me with joy. But last week, my mother called and told me I should not come to the party. I did not understand why. I had no idea that just a few hours after that celebration, a single photograph posted online would shatter everything I ever believed about myself and my family. Before we dive into this story, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. If this is your first time here, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you will want to stay for what comes next, because this secret changed my entire life. I grew up in what most people would consider a picture-perfect American family. My father, Richard, is 67 years old now, a retired lawyer who spent decades building a reputation as one of the most respected attorneys in Colorado Springs. He is the kind of man who speaks slowly and deliberately, as if every word carries weight. People always said he commanded respect without ever raising his voice. My mother, Diane, is 64. She used to be an elementary school teacher before she retired to focus on maintaining our family home, and more importantly, maintaining the image of our family to the outside world. Everything had to look perfect with my mother. The house, the garden, the holiday cards, the way we dressed when company came over. Appearance was everything to her. Then there is my older sister, Meredith. She is 35, a successful dermatologist, with her own practice, a beautiful home, and the kind of life that my parents never stopped talking about. Meredith was always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one whose accomplishments were displayed like trophies for everyone to admire. And then there was me. I was always just there, existing in the background, never quite fitting into the frame of this supposedly perfect family portrait. Growing up, I noticed things that I could never quite explain. Small differences that seemed insignificant on their own, but added up over time. At family dinners and holiday gatherings, Meredith always sat next to our father at the head of the table. I was usually placed at the far end near the kitchen, as if I were an afterthought. When birthdays came around, Meredith's celebrations were elaborate affairs with dozens of guests, custom cakes, and decorations that transformed our backyard into something magical. My birthdays were quiet. A simple dinner at home, maybe a store-bought cake, and a card that felt more obligatory than heartfelt. I remember one summer when I was about 10 years old. I was looking through old family photo albums in the living room, curious about what I looked like as a baby. I flipped through page after page of Meredith's infant photographs. There were hundreds of them. Meredith in the hospital, Meredith coming home for the first time, Meredith's first smile, first steps, first everything. But when I searched for my own baby pictures, I found almost nothing. A handful of photos from when I was already several months old, none from the hospital, none of those precious first moments that parents usually treasure. I asked my mother about it once. I remember standing in the kitchen doorway holding one of the albums and asking why there were so few pictures of me as a baby. She did not even look up from the dishes she was washing. Her answer was quick and dismissive. "You were born during a difficult time," she said. "I was exhausted and did not have the energy to take photographs. Your father was busy with a big case. We just did not think about it." Even at 10 years old, something about that explanation did not feel right. But I accepted it, because what else could I do? She was my mother. I had no reason to doubt her words. As I grew older, the differences became more pronounced but also more subtle. It was not that my parents were openly cruel to me. They provided for me, sent me to good schools, made sure I had clothes and food and everything I needed. But there was always an emotional distance that I could not bridge. When Meredith came home from college, my mother would cook her favorite meals and spend hours talking with her about her life. When I came home, the conversations were brief and surface level. "How is work?" "Fine." "Are you seeing anyone?" "No." "Okay, well, let me know if you need anything." I became an adult, determined to prove myself worthy of my family's love and attention. I worked hard in school, graduated with honors, got a stable job, saved money, built a life for myself. I called my mother every Sunday without fail. I sent thoughtful gifts for every birthday and holiday. I drove 4 hours to visit whenever I could. I did everything right, or at least I thought I did. But no matter what I accomplished, no matter how hard I tried, I always felt like I was on the outside looking in. My relationship with Meredith was complicated. We were not close, but we were not enemies either. We simply existed in parallel, rarely intersecting in any meaningful way. She had her life. I had mine. And the 3 years between us felt more like 30. Sometimes I wondered if she knew something I did not, if there was a reason for the invisible wall between us. But whenever I tried to get closer, she would pull away, always too busy, always too preoccupied with her own world. The last time I visited my parents was about 2 months before their anniversary. I drove down on a Saturday morning hoping to spend quality time with them. My mother greeted me at the door with a quick hug and immediately launched into a detailed description of Meredith's new house. The marble countertops, the swimming pool, the neighborhood with the excellent school district for the children she might have someday. I listened and nodded, waiting for her to ask about my life. When she finally paused, she looked at me as if suddenly remembering I was there. "So how is your work going?" she asked. I started to tell her about a promotion I was in line for, a significant step up in my career. But before I could finish my second sentence, she interrupted. "That reminds me," she said, "Meredith's practice is expanding. She is hiring 2 new doctors. Is not that wonderful?" I stopped talking. I smiled and agreed that yes, it was wonderful. And I told myself what I always told myself. Maybe this is just how parents are. Maybe they love us differently, but equally. Maybe I am being too sensitive, expecting too much. I convinced myself that everything was fine, that I was overreacting. Looking back now, I realize I was just trying to survive in a family that had never fully accepted me. 3 weeks before my parents' 40th anniversary, I called my mother to discuss the celebration. I was genuinely excited. 40 years of marriage is a remarkable achievement, and I wanted to be part of honoring that milestone. I had already been thinking about what I could contribute. Maybe I could help with the decorations, or coordinate with vendors, or even just arrive a few days early to help set up. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. "Hi, Mom," I said, keeping my voice cheerful. "I have been thinking about the anniversary party. I want to help. What can I do?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. A long, uncomfortable pause that made my stomach tighten. "Oh," she finally said. "Well, that is sweet of you to offer, but Meredith has already taken care of everything." I pushed forward, trying to ignore the knot forming in my chest. "That is okay. I can still help with something." I was thinking I could come down a few days early, help with the decorations, run errands, whatever you need. Another pause. No, that will not be necessary. Meredith hired a professional event planner. Everything is handled. I felt the familiar sting of being unnecessary, but I shook it off. "Well, at least tell me the details so I can plan my trip. What time should I arrive? Is there a dress code?" My mother sighed, and in that sigh I heard something I did not want to acknowledge. "We will figure out the details later," she said. "I have to go now. Your father needs help with something." She hung up before I could say goodbye. I told myself she was just busy. Planning a big event is stressful. She did not mean to be short with me. These were the excuses I made, the same excuses I had been making my entire life. 1 week before the party, I called again. This time, I needed concrete information. I had to request time off from work, book my travel, figure out logistics. I dialed my mother's number, already rehearsing the questions I would ask. She answered on the second ring. "Yvonne," she said, and her voice sounded different, tighter, more guarded. "Hi, Mom. I just need to confirm the details for next Saturday. What time does the party start? Should I bring anything?" Silence stretched between us. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her searching for words. "Yvonne," she said slowly, "I have been thinking." And I believe it would be best if you did not come to the party this year. The words did not make sense at first. They rattled around in my brain like loose coins, refusing to form a coherent thought. What do you mean? I asked. The party is going to be intimate, she continued. Just close family and a few of our dearest friends. The venue is small. We have limited space. I am your daughter, I said, and my voice came out smaller than I intended. How am I not close family? I could hear her frustration building. You are making this difficult, she said. I am telling you that it would be better if you did not come. Can you not just accept that? No, I said, feeling something inside me shift. I cannot accept that without an explanation. Why do you not want me there? Her voice turned cold. Because I said so, Yvonne. I am your mother, and I am telling you not to come. That should be enough. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my apartment staring at the phone in my hand, trying to process what had just happened. My mother had just uninvited me from my own parents' anniversary party. Not postponed, not rescheduled, uninvited, as if I were a stranger, an inconvenience, someone whose presence was not wanted or needed. I called my father next, desperately hoping he would explain, would intervene, would tell me this was all a misunderstanding. He answered with his usual measured tone. Yvonne. What is it, Dad? I just talked to Mom. She said I should not come to the anniversary party. That cannot be right. There was a brief silence, and then your mother has her reasons. It would be best if you respected her wishes. But why? I pressed. What did I do wrong? Why does she not want me there? I could almost see him pinching the bridge of his nose the way he always did when he was done with a conversation. Just listen to your mother, he said. It is not up for discussion. He ended the call without another word. My hands were shaking as I opened my phone and sent a text message to Meredith. I typed and retyped the words 12 times before finally hitting send. Hey, can we talk? Something is going on with Mom in the party, and I do not understand what is happening. I watched the screen. The message showed as delivered, then as read, and then nothing. No response, no typing indicator, just silence. As a last resort, I called my Aunt Ruth, my mother's younger sister. She had always been warmer to me than my own mother, and I hoped she might offer some insight, some explanation that would make this nightmare make sense. Aunt Ruth answered with her usual cheerful greeting, but when I explained why I was calling her, tone changed immediately. Oh, honey, she said, and I could hear the discomfort in her voice. This is between you and your parents. I really cannot get involved. But do you know why I asked? Do you know what is going on? A long pause. Then I think you should talk to your mother again. This is not my story to tell. She had never spoken to me like that before. Guarded, careful, as if she were protecting something or someone. After we hung up, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the silence of unanswered questions. My entire family was keeping something from me, building a wall that I could not see over or around. And for the first time in my life, I started to wonder if there was more to my feeling of being an outsider than just personality differences or parental favoritism. Something was very, very wrong. The day of the anniversary party arrived with a heaviness I cannot fully describe. I woke up that morning in my apartment in Denver, 4 hours away from the celebration I had been forbidden to attend. The Colorado sunlight streamed through my windows like any other Saturday morning, but everything felt different, wrong, suffocating. I went through the motions of my usual routine, made coffee, showered, got dressed, but every action felt mechanical, like I was watching myself from outside my own body. My mind kept circling back to the same impossible reality my family was gathering to celebrate without me, and I did not know why. I tried to work. I had brought some files home from the office spreadsheets that needed reviewing reports that required my attention, but I could not focus. The numbers blurred together on the screen, meaningless and irrelevant. How could I think about quarterly earnings when my own mother had told me I was not welcome at her anniversary party? Around noon, one of my coworkers, a woman named Samantha who sat 2 desks away from me at the office, sent me a text message. She was having a small get-together at her place that evening and wanted to know if I would like to come. Any other weekend I might have said yes, but today I could not imagine sitting in a room full of acquaintances, pretending to be fine, making small talk about weather and weekend plans while my heart was breaking. I texted back thanks for the invite, but I am not feeling well. Maybe next time. The afternoon stretched endlessly before me. I found myself wandering around my apartment, picking things up and putting them down, unable to settle anywhere. On my bookshelf sat a framed photograph of my family from about 5 years ago. We were all standing in front of my parents' house during Christmas. My father in his usual sweater vest, my mother with her practiced smile, Meredith looking radiant in red, and me standing slightly apart from the others, my smile looking forced, even in the frozen moment of a photograph. I picked up the frame and stared at it for a long time. Had I always been this separate from them? Had I always been standing on the edge of the family, rather than at its center? The evidence was right there in front of me, captured in silver halide and glass. By 3 p.m, I could not stand being alone with my thoughts anymore. I called my best friend Kelsey. We had known each other since college, and she was the one person I could always count on to be honest with me, even when the truth was hard to hear. She answered on the first ring. "Yvonne, how are you holding up? Not great," I admitted. I am trying to distract myself, but I cannot stop thinking about what is happening right now at that party. Kelsey was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Have you considered that maybe something else is going on here? Something bigger than just your mom being difficult?" "What do you mean? I mean, this is not normal, Yvonne. Parents do not just uninvite their children from family events without a reason. And the way everyone is acting, your dad, your sister, your aunt, it is like they are all protecting some kind of secret." I had been thinking the same thing, but hearing Kelsey say it out loud made it feel more real and more frightening. "I do not know what it could be," I said. "I have tried to think of anything I might have done wrong, anything that would explain why they would push me away like this. But I cannot come up with anything." "Maybe it is not about something you did," Kelsey said gently. "Maybe it is about something they did." We talked for another hour, and by the time we hung up, I felt slightly less alone, but no less confused. The questions kept multiplying in my mind, each one more unsettling than the last. Evening came, and I found myself doing exactly what I had promised myself I would not do. I opened Facebook on my phone and navigated to Meredith's profile. The first photos had already been posted. I scrolled through them slowly, each image a tiny knife twisting in my chest. The restaurant looked elegant, all white tablecloths and crystal chandeliers. My parents sat at the head of a long table, my mother in a deep purple dress, my father in a charcoal suit. They were smiling in a way I rarely saw them smile, genuine and unguarded and happy. The table was surrounded by people, my Aunt Ruth and her husband, cousins I had not seen in years, family friends whose names I vaguely remembered, Meredith and her boyfriend, a surgeon whose name I could never recall. Everyone who mattered to my parents was there. Everyone except me. I counted the chairs in one of the photos. There was no empty seat, no place that had been left open for me. They had not even pretended to include me in the planning. The table was set for exactly the number of people who were present, as if I had never existed. The comment section under each photo was filled with well wishes. "Congratulations on 40 amazing years. What a beautiful couple. Here is to 40 more." Not a single person asked where I was. Not one comment mentioned my absence. I put my phone face down on the coffee table and sat in the darkness of my apartment, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. My family was celebrating without me, and the world was spinning on as if nothing were wrong, as if I did not matter, as if I had never mattered at all. I do not know how long I sat there in the dark. It might have been minutes. It might have been hours. Time had lost its meaning, replaced by a numb emptiness that settled over me like a heavy blanket. Around 10 o'clock that night, my phone buzzed with a notification. New post from Meredith. I told myself not to look. I told myself that nothing good could come from torturing myself with more images of the celebration I had been excluded from. But my hand reached for the phone anyway, moving on its own, driven by some masochistic need to understand. The new post was a single photograph with a caption that read, 40 years of love. This photo display says it all. The image showed a corner of the restaurant that had been transformed into a memory wall. Dozens of framed photographs were arranged on an elegant table chronicling my parents' life together. Their wedding day, vacations, holidays, milestones, the story of a marriage told in snapshots. I zoomed in, searching for myself in those images. I found a few group shots where I appeared on the edge of the frame, partially visible, almost an afterthought. But there were no individual photos of me. No proud displays of my accomplishments. Nothing that suggested I was a valued member of this family. And then I noticed something else. In the far right corner of the display, there was an unusual item. It looked like a letter or document that had been framed and placed among the photographs. The glass reflected the restaurant's lighting, making it difficult to see clearly, but something about it caught my attention. I saved the image to my phone and opened it in my photo editing app. My hands were trembling as I zoomed in, adjusted the contrast, tried to make out the words on that framed paper. It was handwritten. The writing was elegant but unfamiliar, not my mother's neat print or my father's cramped scrawl. The paper looked old, slightly yellowed, and I could see a date in the upper corner. The date was 32 years ago. The year I was born. My heart began to pound as I strained to make out the words. The resolution of the photo limited how much I could see, but certain phrases became clear as I zoomed and enhanced and studied every pixel. My daughter. Please take care of her. Richard knows. I cannot keep her. The phone slipped from my hands and landed on the carpet with a soft thud. I could not breathe. The walls of my apartment seemed to close in around me, the ceiling pressing down the floor, giving way beneath my feet. This could not be real. I was misreading the letter. I was seeing things that were not there, constructing meaning where there was none. But even as I told myself these things, I knew. Deep in some part of me that had always sensed the truth, I knew. I was not Diane's daughter. I picked up my phone with hands that would not stop shaking. I looked at the letter again, searching for something that would disprove what I was seeing. But the words were still there, blurry but unmistakable. A letter from a woman written 32 years ago asking someone to take care of her daughter. Mentioning Richard, my father. Saying she could not keep her baby. Me. She was talking about me. 32 years of my life collapsed into that single moment. Every memory, every feeling of being different, every question I had ever asked myself about why I did not fit in all of it suddenly made terrible, perfect sense. I was not my mother's child. I was the product of my father's affair, the living evidence of his betrayal, a secret that had been hidden and denied and suppressed for over 3 decades. Diane had raised me, but she had never loved me. How could she? Every time she looked at me, she saw her husband's infidelity staring back at her. The tears came without warning, a flood of grief and rage and relief all mixed together. Grief for the family I thought I had, rage at the lies I had been told, and beneath it all, a strange and unexpected relief. Finally, I understood. Finally, the pieces fit together. I was not crazy or overly sensitive or ungrateful. I had been right all along. Something was wrong. Something had always been wrong. And now I knew what it was. I cried until there were no tears left, until my chest ached and my eyes burned and the first gray light of dawn began to seep through my windows. Then I got up, washed my face, and made a decision. I was going to confront them. I was going to drive to Colorado Springs and look my parents in the eye and demand the truth. No more secrets, no more lies, no more pretending. I deserved to know who I really was. The drive from Denver to Colorado Springs usually takes about 90 minutes. That morning, it felt like both an eternity and a heartbeat. The Colorado landscape rolled past my windows, familiar and foreign at the same time, as if I were seeing it through new eyes. Because I was a new person now, or rather, I was finally seeing myself clearly for the first time. I did not call ahead to announce my arrival. I did not want to give them time to prepare to coordinate their stories to build new walls of deception. I wanted to see their faces when I confronted them with the truth. I stopped once at a rest area about halfway there. I parked my car and got out to breathe the cool mountain air. My reflection stared back at me from the restroom mirror, red-eyed and exhausted, but somehow stronger than I had ever seen myself. I thought about what I was about to do. I was about to burn down the illusion of my family, to destroy the careful fiction they had constructed over 3 decades. There would be no going back from this. But there was also no going back to who I used to be. The woman who accepted scraps of affection and called it love. The woman who made excuses for being treated like a stranger in her own family. That woman was gone. She had died sometime in the night somewhere between the first tear and the last. I got back in my car and continued driving. It was just past noon when I pulled into my parents' driveway. The house looked the same as it always had, a beautiful colonial revival with white pillars and a perfectly manicured lawn. The American dream made manifest in brick and mortar. But I saw it differently now. It was not a home. It was a stage set, a carefully constructed facade designed to hide the dysfunction within. Meredith's car was parked in the driveway. Of course she would be here. The golden child probably still basking in the glow of last night's successful event, probably receiving praise and gratitude from our parents. Our parents. The word felt strange now, inadequate. Diane was not my mother. Richard was my father. But he was also the man who had never protected me, never stood up for me, never treated me as equal to his other daughter. I walked to the front door. I did not hesitate. I did not knock. I simply turned the handle and walked in. They were sitting in the living room, all 3 of them. My mother on the love seat, a cup of tea in her hands. My father in his usual armchair, reading glasses perched on his nose. Meredith on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, probably admiring the comments on her anniversary party photos. They all looked up when I entered. The shock on their faces was immediate and unmistakable. "Yvonne," my mother said, and her voice came out strangled. "What are you doing here? I told you not to come." "The party is over," I said, and I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "I am not here for the party. I am here for the truth." I could see them exchanging glances, a silent conversation happening right in front of me. My father set down his newspaper. Meredith locked her phone screen. My mother's teacup rattled against its saucer. "I do not know what you are talking about," my mother said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You need to leave. This is not appropriate." I pulled out my phone and held it up so they could all see the screen. The photograph of the letter, zoomed and enhanced, was clearly visible. "Someone needs to explain this to me," I said. "Someone needs to tell me who wrote this letter and why it has been framed and displayed in our family photos for who knows how long." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It roared in my ears, filled the room, pressed against the walls. My mother's face went white. My father closed his eyes. Meredith looked at the floor. I repeated myself slowly and clearly. Who is my mother? Because according to this letter, it is not the woman sitting across from me. My mother, Diane, began to speak, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. "You have no right to come in here and make accusations. You do not understand anything. You do not know what I sacrificed, what I gave up, what I suffered because of you." I did not flinch. "What you suffered because of me," I said. "I was a baby. I did not ask to be born. I did not ask to be brought into your home. If anyone should be talking about suffering, it is me. I am the one who grew up feeling unloved and unwanted, and could never understand why." Finally, my father spoke. His voice was quieter than I expected, older somehow. 33 years ago, he began and stopped. He looked at Diane, who was shaking her head violently, silently begging him not to continue. But he did. 33 years ago, he said, "I made a mistake. I had an affair with a woman I met through work. It was brief, meaningless. But she became pregnant, and when you were born, she could not keep you. She was not in a position to raise a child. She asked me to take you." I could barely breathe. "And Diane," I said. "What about her?" "I convinced Diane to raise you as our own," my father continued. "We told everyone you were ours. We altered documents, created a story, made sure no one would ever know the truth. It was supposed to protect the family, protect my career, protect Diane from the humiliation." I turned to look at Diane. Her face was twisted with decades of suppressed resentment. "And you agreed," I said. "You took me in. You raised me. But you never loved me." "How could I?" She spat the words, finally breaking free. "Every time I looked at you, I saw her. I saw his betrayal. I saw everything I tried to forget. You were never supposed to exist. The cruelty of her words should have shattered me. But instead, they set me free. Because now I knew. The coldness, the distance, the feeling of being unwanted, it was real. It had always been real. And it had never, ever been my fault." I turned to Meredith. "And you," I said. "When did you find out?" She looked up at me, and for the first time I saw something like shame in her eyes. "I found out when I was 18, she said quietly. "I overheard Mom and Dad arguing one night. They did not know I was listening. So for 14 years you knew. And you never told me." She shook her head. "They made me promise. They said it would destroy the family if you found out." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Destroy the family," I repeated. "Look around Meredith. Does this look like a family worth protecting?" I stood in the center of that living room, surrounded by the people who had shaped my entire life, and I felt something shifting inside me. The pain was still there, raw and real, but it was being transformed into something else. Strength, clarity, resolve. I turned to face my mother, Diane, who had never truly been my mother at all. I spoke slowly and deliberately, making sure every word landed exactly where I intended it to. "I understand I said that you were hurt by what Richard did. Betrayal is one of the deepest wounds a person can experience. But you made a choice, Diane. You chose to take your anger and your pain and direct it at an innocent child. You punished me for something I had no part in. You withheld love from a baby who needed it from a child, who could not understand why she was treated differently from a teenager, who tried desperately to earn your approval from an adult, who called you every Sunday, hoping that maybe this week things would be different. Her face was still hard, still defensive, but I could see cracks forming in her armor. I am not asking for an apology," I continued. "I know you are not capable of giving me not one that would mean anything. But I need you to hear this. I was never the problem. I was never the reason for your unhappiness. I was just an easy target." I turned to my father next. Richard, the man whose DNA I carried, whose silence had allowed my mistreatment to continue for 3 decades. "You could have protected me," I said. "You knew the truth. You knew that I was your daughter, your flesh and blood, and you watched her treat me like an outsider for my entire life. You never intervened. You never defended me. You never once pulled me aside and told me that I mattered, that I was loved, that I was not imagining the coldness I felt." He could not meet my eyes. "Your silence was a choice," I continued. "Every day that you said nothing, every time you told me to just listen to your mother, every moment you prioritized your reputation over my well-being, that was a choice. And you will have to live with those choices for the rest of your life." Finally, I turned to Meredith, my sister, or half-sister as I now understood. "You," I said, and my voice softened slightly because despite everything, there was still a part of me that remembered the little girl I used to follow around, desperate for her attention and approval. "You knew for 14 years. You watched me struggle and question myself and wonder what was wrong with me. You could have told me the truth. You could have been my ally, my friend, my real sister. Instead, you chose to protect their secret. You chose to enjoy being the favored child while I suffered. I am sorry, Meredith whispered, and tears were streaming down her face. I was scared. They told me it would tear everything apart. It did tear everything apart, I said, but not because of the truth, because of the lies. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key to my parents' house. The key I had carried with me since I was 18, the key that was supposed to symbolize that I would always be welcome here, that this would always be my home. I walked over to the coffee table and placed the key on its surface. The metal made a soft clicking sound against the wood final and irreversible. I am not here to beg for your love, I said, addressing all three of them. I spent 32 years trying to earn something that should have been given to me freely. I am done. I straightened my spine, lifted my chin, and looked at them one last time. I am leaving, I said. Not because you asked me to, not because I am being pushed out. I am leaving because I deserve better than this. I deserve a family that loves me without conditions, that accepts me without reservations, that celebrates my presence, instead of merely tolerating it. And since I cannot find that here, I will find it somewhere else. Or I will build it myself. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Diane say something sharp and defensive, something about sacrifice and ingratitude. I heard Richard clear his throat, probably searching for words that would make the situation manageable, controllable. But then I heard something else. Meredith's voice, quiet but clear. Yvonne, wait. I stopped but did not turn around. I am sorry, she said again. And this time there was something different in her voice. I am sorry for not telling you. I am sorry for letting you suffer alone. I know it does not fix anything, but I am sorry. I looked over my shoulder at her. She was standing now, her face wet with tears, her hands clasped in front of her like she was praying or pleading or both. It does not fix anything, I agreed. But it is a start. Then I walked out the door, got in my car, and drove away from the house I had grown up in, the family I had tried so hard to belong to, the life I had spent 32 years trying to fit into. And for the first time in my entire existence, I felt free. The weeks that followed my confrontation were the hardest of my life. I returned to Denver, to my apartment, to my job, but nothing felt the same. I had torn away the foundation of my identity, and I was left trying to figure out who I was without the family that had defined me. I cried a lot. Not for them, not for the family I had lost, but for myself. For the little girl who had tried so hard and never understood why it was not enough. For the teenager who had questioned her own worth. For the adult who had made excuse after excuse for people who did not deserve her loyalty. I started seeing a therapist, a gentlewoman named Dr. Patricia, who helped me understand that the trauma I had experienced was real and valid, and not my fault. She taught me that healing is not linear, that some days would be harder than others, that grief and anger and relief could all coexist in the same moment. My friend Kelsey was my rock during those dark weeks. She showed up at my apartment with takeout containers and trashy movies. She listened when I needed to talk and sat in comfortable silence when I did not. She reminded me over and over that family is not just about blood. Family is about choice and commitment and unconditional love. About 6 months after that day at my parents' house, I made a decision. I wanted to find my biological mother. I wanted to know where I came from, who I came from, what parts of me belonged to this woman who had given me away 32 years ago. I hired a service that specialized in finding biological relatives. It took several weeks, but eventually they came back with information. My biological mother's name was Sandra. She had lived in Arizona for most of her adult life. She had worked as a nurse, never married, never had other children, and she had died 5 years ago from cancer. I will not pretend that I did not grieve for her, this woman I never knew. I mourn the conversations we would never have, the questions she would never answer, the relationship that could never be built. But I also felt a strange peace. She had not abandoned me out of cruelty or indifference. She had made an impossible choice under impossible circumstances, and she had trusted that her daughter would be cared for. The fact that I was not cared for, not really, was not her fault. It was not my fault either. It was simply a tragedy of circumstances, a chain of bad decisions made by people who prioritized image over love. But the search for Sandra led me somewhere I never expected. She had a half-sister, which meant I had an aunt, and that aunt had a daughter, which meant I had a cousin. Her name was Nora. She lived in San Diego. She was 30 years old, worked as a graphic designer, and when I reached out to her, she responded within hours. We talked on the phone first, then we video called, and 3 months after our first contact, I flew to California to meet her in person. Standing at the arrivals gate at San Diego International Airport, I spotted her immediately. She looked like me. Or rather, I looked like her. The same dark hair, the same high cheekbones, the same smile that crinkled the corners of our eyes. When she hugged me, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. I felt like I belonged. Nora told me about Sandra, about her kindness, her dedication to her patients, her quiet strength, about how she had spoken only once of a daughter she'd given up, how she'd cried and said she hoped that child was happy and loved. I was not, I admitted to Nora, but I am starting to be. We spent a week together in San Diego. She showed me photographs of Sandra, and I stared at them for hours, searching for myself in her features. I found echoes everywhere, in the shape of her eyes, in the way she held her hands, in the stubborn set of her jaw. By the time I flew back to Denver, I felt different, lighter, like I had finally put down a weight I had been carrying my entire life. A year has passed since I walked out of my parents' house. I am not the same person I was before. I am stronger now, more confident, and more at peace. Meredith has reached out several times. At first, I did not respond, but eventually I agreed to meet her for coffee. It was awkward and painful, and nothing like the relationship I had always wished we could have. But she apologized again more fully this time, and she asked if we could try to build something new between us. I told her I was willing to try, but with clear boundaries. I would not tolerate any more lies. I would not accept any more excuses. If she wanted to be my sister, she would have to earn that title. My parents, Richard and Diane, have also attempted contact. My father sent a letter, long and rambling, filled with explanations, but not quite apologies. My mother sent nothing. I have chosen to keep my distance for now. Perhaps one day when they are ready to truly face what they did, we can have a conversation. But I will not hold my breath. As for me, I have learned something important. Family is not determined by blood or legal documents or the house you grew up in. Family is the people who show up for you, who love you without conditions, who celebrate your existence instead of merely tolerating it. I found that family in Kelsey, who has been my sister in every way that matters. I found it in Nora, who welcomed me into her life without hesitation. I found it in Dr. Patricia, who helped me heal wounds I did not even know I had. And I found it in myself, in learning to love and accept the person I am regardless of where I came from. If you are watching this, and you have ever felt like an outsider in your own family, like you do not quite fit, like there is something wrong with you that you cannot name, I want you to hear this. The problem is not you. The problem was never you. Some families are broken in ways that cannot be fixed, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who do not deserve your love so that you can find the people who do. You deserve to be loved wholly and completely. You deserve to belong. And sometimes the family you build is stronger than the family you were born into. That is my story, a story of secrets and lies and betrayal, but also a story of strength and healing and hope. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything? How did you handle it? Leave a comment below and share your experience. Your story might help someone else who is going through the same thing. If this video resonated with you, please hit the like button. It helps more people find these stories and know that they are not alone. And if you want to hear more stories like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss any future uploads. Finally, if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share this video with them. You never know whose life you might change. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of this community. I wish you healing, I wish you peace, and I wish you the courage to walk toward the family you deserve. Take care of yourselves, and remember you are worthy of love. You always have been.